Welcome back, and it's hour 2 of the Friday, August 15th show, and of course we have Ron from LUMEN Photon, far and near infrared light therapy diodes, and I have it actually on my low back right now after vigorous exercise. I'm not hurting, but I'm just, wow, I'll tell you, you feel so good when you use the LUMEN Photon. You can put it over an area, it's going to improve blood flow, stem cell activation, detoxification. I mean, it's just amazing. This device finds so many uses for turning off everything from migraines to sore joints, to reversing peripheral neuropathy, tendinitis. You literally say any health condition you can want to, you can put these pads over an area and it's going to make that body part better. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be your gallbladder, you're passing a kidney stone, it could be irritable bowel, pelvic pain. There really is almost no limit to what you can do with this device. And the settings are so simple. 7 for pain, NICO for healing. You can have specific settings, and let's go over some of those numbers. Numbers, and usually I think you usually use the numbers like 3, 4, and 5. Yeah, ecto, endo, and meso. Okay. Why don't you just tell us what conditions you use for setting number 3, ecto?
The neural tissue in the body, that's primarily what you're talking about. If you want to try to improve your vision, you would use number 3 on there. If you're looking for wrinkle reduction on the face, that sort of thing, number 3. Any skin damage, that sort of thing. Increasing the 3 is the frequency of all the neural tissue in the body, so that includes the brain. So there's a good reason to use it over the brain periodically if you have the opportunity to do this. And that's the frequency of the brain, whilst number 4 increases the circulation throughout the brain. So that combination works really well to as we age, and I'm in my mid-60s now, so I use it consistently there. And my vision is still very close to 20/20.
Right. Now, you know that 90% of the afferents to your brain are from your eye. But did you know that and of course you know this because they're both ectoderm, that the skin and the brain are actually of the same ontogeny? Yep. And what you have to realize is that the largest organ of the body is skin. And your skin is a neurological organ. You know you have taste receptors, sound receptor, vibration receptors, light receptors in your skin, and they're distributed through what's called these Langerhans complexes at the junction of the dermal and epidermal junction that we call the rete pegs or whatever, the junctions there at the deep area of the dermal-epidermal junction. And so the skin is a very powerful organ. In fact, your body cannot have pain without skin because it's like having a if you want to call it a projector screen or called OLED screen to actually for your brain to see the pain, for your body to see the pain, actually be projected on the skin. So when you use LUMEN Photon, you're changing the biochemistry of the deeper organs below it. You're changing the electrophysiology of the organs. You're detoxing organs. You're making them more alkaline. You're improving blood circulation and lymphatic circulation. You're activating stem cells. And you're helping the body's immune system identify pathogens because you turn on everything. That's why I think LUMEN Photon is so amazing. So if you get somebody with congested lungs or calcified arteries or peripheral neuropathy, congestive heart failure, we have stories of people putting it over their heart and they have hypertension, put it over L1, which is over the kidneys, because the kidneys regulate what's called the angiotensin-converting enzymes, which are the primary cause of hypertension. The other area is a carotid body up in your neck, so you can actually put it over the neck, and it'll reset your blood pressure because it's in the autonomic balance. Because remember, blood pressure is an autonomic condition trying to improve perfusion to tissues because it perceives that you don't have enough perfusion. So when the body is misperceiving perfusion signals, it'll increase the driving pressure, which is why your blood pressure goes up, because you got vasospasm combined with increased driving pressures, and eventually you end up with end organ damage. So LUMEN Photon, you can put over your low back, and you'll lower your C-reactive protein and plasminogen activator inhibitor. You'll reduce levels of inflammatory markers of vascular disease. That's pretty neat. And we're talking about 75-85% too, not just a little tiny bit, but a lot.
We have had a lot of people that have quite a few people. I'm not sure exactly how many, but over the years, people that were in the 9/11, in particular the nurses who were there trying to help people, and they all had all sorts of lung damage and stuff like that. And somehow they started getting our equipment and they spread the word. We didn't have to do anything.
Well, I usually try to give...
People were calling us saying, we can't believe, thank you, because it helps them to breathe and all that sort of thing.
Right. It's interesting. It's a portable version, but it's actually deeper penetrating than our ProLine infrared sauna. The ProLine sauna will cover the whole body, but it will penetrate about 4 to 6 inches. The Lumen Photon actually will penetrate a foot. And I tell people, if you want to detox, you want to use probably both. And you want to use pulse magnetic field as well as the Soma Pulse. We're also looking at a device that I'll probably be posting up soon. I've been researching from a manufacturer in Shanghai, China, that is an incredible machine, an energizer, that's going to be a great price, too, for people to be able to afford to get a full-body energizer machine. The Lumen Photon, what I do with Lumen going to head to toe is, if you're balding, if you have sinus problems, if you have periodontal tooth problems, if you've got vascular disease in your head because you've had a stroke or a concussion, you want to improve the blood-brain barrier. Let's say, and we see a lot of people that are walking around with cell phones slapped to the side of their head. They don't realize they're increasing the risk of a cataract, retinal problems, and brain tumors dramatically, or raised cranial nerve tumors. You're going to reconstitute the blood-brain barrier to improve its metabolism, and that Lumen Photon will help. And we have people who have autism, schizophrenia, Asperger's syndrome, any kind of brain disorder, chronic depression, and Lumen Photon will help transcranial improvement in circulation for stroke, for migraine, which is a risk for stroke, and for post-traumatic brain injuries, such as these football players who will be back out there banging their heads against each other, or as I saw the World Cup, it looks like they didn't have helmets. I think it's more dangerous playing the World Cup because these guys are regularly jumping in the air and smacking their skulls against each other without even helmets.
Yeah. Those are many strokes. It's like hitting them when they get banged like that.
They get three things. I'll be more specific scientifically. First, you get what's called lemon meringue syndrome, where the dendritic and neuron or astrocyte zone between the white and gray matter, you can actually have the meringue on the lemon meringue pie, where the meringue starts to slide on the pie surface. That's not good. Where you shear off the dendrites. The second thing that happens is what's called microglial activation, where you start increasing hydroperoxy and nitroperoxy radical, which causes astroglial cell either drop out, they die, or they go into metabolic stasis so that they can't produce an action potential or a neural network. The third is they can do what's called metabolic imbalances. Because of increased stress, you don't get proper neurotransmitter levels, and certain pathways start to dysmyelinate. So you actually get post-traumatic dysmyelination. And if you do a T1 weighted MRI scan, SPECT scan, or positron emission tomogram to look for brain metabolism, you'll find that their neural networks are not working now, and their oxygen uptake and their metabolism is shut off. And if you do an organic acid test, like the organics or plasma activation metabolites and brain neurotransmitters, you'll see they're deficient or way out of balance. So those are the three categories, and I know how to do all these tests. So when somebody says, Dr. Deagle, you can't do that, you're not talking to the right doctor. You're talking to Dr. Deagle. I've been very inquisitive, using university labs, imaging centers for decades and decades. So I consult and teach specialists and legal specialists how to do this. And if you're out there and you don't know how to improve someone's had a post-traumatic brain injury, come to Deagle and I'll provide you information.
It was really a heartbreak years ago when we had players from the Carolina Panthers who were coming to our clinic from Charlotte, which was about 70 miles away, because this was better than the cold lasers that they had at the camps. And it just blew.
Well, of course, it's going to race through their whole brain.
Everybody else on the team, the managers, angry because they were paid all this money for these very expensive cold lasers that they weren't doing what our equipment was doing then.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, but by the way, your equipment's powerful enough to go through a whole big horse. Yeah. So you got these big animals. And by the way, horses I consider almost a magical animal. Yeah. I know dogs are awesome, but horses are like magical. And when you can help one of these animals get better, it's amazing. You almost feel like this kind of sense of glory comes over you when you help a horse get better. Because they usually don't. When you see a horse going down, the people get out there, we got to put a horse down, it's too bad. And you start using Lumen Photon and they recover. It's amazing.
Yeah, and the U.S. Olympic equestrian team this last cycle did use our equipment.
Welcome back, and I can tell you, I'm holding in my hand a bottle of Mountain Red Velvet, and I have to thank the Most High God, and I have to thank the deer, and then I have to thank you, Karen, and your husband for putting together the only xylazine-free, non-altered, 100% natural deer velvet. There are other companies out there producing inferior product or extracting one thing and calling it a miracle because they took one thing out of 100 or almost 400 products, 396 biomolecules. But like the body, it's an orchestra. It's not a single instrument. And there's 6 growth factors here. These particular components are superior to anything that the ancient Chinese emperors had, because it was considered not just for the emperors but for any high class. This was the center of not just immune boosting, neurological protection, regeneration, age lengthening. Try to keep your marbles when you're getting older and you're trying to cling to power in your 6th, 7th, and 8th decade and you're in China 1,000 years ago. This is one of the things that allowed them to do that. Where the average person was old at 30 and dead at 40, taking Mountain Red Velvet allowed the elite to live to their 80s and beyond and be vigorous. And that's what's pretty neat about it. Nowadays we have a far superior product that doesn't destroy the biomolecules because it's low temperature extraction. And it also provides building blocks for literally every tissue, from brain, heart, liver, kidney, skull, teeth. And when you present the building blocks to build a better you, which is the tagline I use, to build a better you, and you're building a better you every day. People don't realize, and I got a new saying, how Confucius say, after 40, your countenance is dependent on your attitude and your lifestyle. I would have to say that no one is older than a child, because your body is never older than a child except for your neurons. And even there, when they used to say that you had a limited number of neurons, if you have the building blocks, you build new neurons. So when they tried to tell our medical student colleagues that were drinking too much or partying too much in first or second year medical school and saying you have a limited number of brain cells, so you're not going to get through medical school training or residency if you continue to burn them at this rate, we have good news that if you take Mountain Red Velvet and things like DHA, acetylcarnitine, etc., you're going to make new neurons to replace the bad ones you just flushed down the beer or alcohol when they're drinking yards of beer, etc., at the frat houses. So the fact is that every day you're building a better you. You need several things. First off, you need sleep. If you're not getting the sleep, restful sleep, it's not just stage 4 sleep. You need to also have the release of growth hormones. But when those growth hormones, the bell rings in your body, if you don't have the building blocks, it's almost like the fancy, as I mentioned before, the McLaren supercar or the Italian Lamborghini technician arrives in by private Airstream jet, and he's got a big box of all the parts to fix your $6 million car. You better be ready, because when he's ready and he's at your garage and he's got all his equipment going, you hear it's because he's pulling it apart and he's going to put it back together. If the parts aren't there, that car's not coming out of the garage. The problem is whether you're building a peripheral nerve for your brain or liver because you've had a chronic liver inflammation from hepatitis B or C, or you've imbibed too much alcohol, or if you've had blood sugar, so you've got glycated proteins and you're trying to replace them with good proteins that reestablish normal neurological function, etc. If you're trying to rebuild connective tissues around your joints, like you've done a partial tear of a rotator cuff or meniscus, you got to take the building blocks, and there is no other source for them. You might say, well, I have a good diet, I do this and that, yeah, but can you build the little small parts department to actually replace those organs and tissues that have got micro injuries? No, you can't. And when you start taking Mountain Red Velvet at an adequate dosage, and I usually tell people out of every 3 capsules, take one of them, open them, and put them under your tongue. So some of those biomolecules, I theorize, are so highly fragile, you're going to absorb them directly, but you don't want to pull it apart and make a new product. You just want to absorb it as it is. And then the other ones you just swallow. And I usually take at least 3 a day. And I can tell you, if I do that along with my other nutraceuticals like leptin metabolic, tendon mitter, joint performance, and collagen max, I'm whizzing along. I'm 62 and a half, and I have less aches and pains than I did when I was 35 or 25. I mean, I feel great. And I get my exercise, vibrational exercise, they call it vitamin VX. I get my pool exercise, I do my treadmill and other things. And because I take all these supplements, and I have these energetic and other technologies, especially Mountain Red Velvet, my body says, high five, DEAGLE, you got it now. I'm going to continue to rebuild you so when you're 70, you're not going to be a cripple. And not just a physical cripple, a mental cripple, or a ocular cripple, so you can't see. When people start taking this, they say, my brain's working better. I'm seeing better. My joints move like they've been lubed. I recover quicker from sports injuries. And we have karate experts that are extreme athletes. We have elderly people with ankylosing spondylitis that say, my doctors condemn me. They're going to give me infliximab and all these disease-modifying drugs. And I think your father's a good example of that. He's had this for years. Started Mountain Red Velvet, and he's out there working with these boys, as you say, Red Deer, which means that the man is active at a year when the doctors would have condemned him to a wheelchair or a nursing facility and said, well, I'm sorry, for the next 20 years before we finally pronounce you dead and write on your tombstone, you're going to sit in this chair and drool, but if you move, it'll hurt like hell, and don't expect to be able to take care of yourself.
That's right, and yet he's out there with our boys every single day at 76, and as you say, he does not have the aches and pains that he did when he was in his 40s.
Isn't that awful? Yeah. It shows you, it condemns you that if you see the toxic docs, they're called the knucklehead dinosaur docs. The docs that don't know the biochemistry or physiology of the body, don't realize it's a plasma interconnected supercomputer, don't realize it's a living thing, is an informational matrix of biomolecules, an orchestra of vibrational sound and infrared light. And when you add all these molecules, and the body says, ha-ha, the orchestra has arrived, the maestro is here to take his baton and tap his lectern. And, you can just see him telling molecules to whiz across and make structural proteins and enzymes. And it's like an orchestra. If you could hear the sounds of the cell, it would be amazing if you see that metaphor. And as they say, what happens is, when we're doing stem cell therapy, for example, I've talked to clinics like the Steam Block Clinic up in Orange County or other clinics. They significantly, and again, they're getting better at Steam Block and other ones because they're kind of realizing we're going to fail putting stem cells in if people don't have biomolecules like living probiotics in their gut. If they don't have the biomolecules to rebuild the tissue in their body, if they've got poor redox potential and low energetics of their cells and they're very, very acid instead of alkaline. But if the building blocks aren't there, how the heck can the stem cells actually go there? All the stem cells are, in a sense, is a C scaffolding, which is ergothioneine, being put up. They arrive the stem cell with their luggage, which is the biomolecules to rebuild the tissue. But if those luggage packages are not there, all these biomolecules, the stem cell is going to arrive and say, well, I'm here, but I can't do anything. I'm a contractor, but there's no flooring, no walls, no kitchen appliances to go in. Like that show Flip or Flop or Flipping Boston. There's nothing to flip. Your stem cells arrive and now they can't integrate into the tissue. They don't turn into whatever they're supposed to turn into because they need biomolecules. And when you have the Mountain Red Velvet, the body says, I can rebuild a peripheral nerve. I can remyelinate with a Schwann cell. I can rebuild that liver cell so the liver Kupffer cells behave themselves and liver sinusoids look nice. To build a better you, get Mountain Red Velvet. Give it to your pets. You want your pets to stay around? Give them Mountain Red Velvet. You have long-lasting, happy pets. Today from us, Nutrimedical. Welcome back, and we're going to try to see if we can contact to Jay Newman. We're going to talk about Silver 100. You hear lots of advertisements out there. We had one lady wrote in, she wants to get pregnant, and she is pregnant. She wants to keep her health up. We gave some recommendations. Definitely do not make at home your own colloidal silver. Colloidal silver is just silver chunks. Only the ionic state is active, which is why our Silver 100 is hundreds to thousands of times stronger and far safer. It's going to kill off Ebola. It will kill off all known viruses, bacteria, pathogens, etc. We have 3 major antipathogenics. Nutridyne, which is completely unique, the only Tesla-activated diatomic plasma form of iodine in the world. We have Silver 100, the only ionic form in a citrate complex, and any other complex of any other biomolecule would violate the patent. There is no other competitor. And that includes nanoparticle and colloidal. They are so frail and weak compared to the Silver 100, which is only 100% in the ionic state. It stimulates stem cells, kills off all pathogens, and will go through the biofilm. And we have, of course, Allison Med, my latest update from the ALAMed. You get 200 milligrams more, and it's much better price than the ALAMed. We still carry the Alamax and ALAMed. We have the Alamax liquid, the Alamax cream as well. So that's what's available, and that's really important, especially with the Ebola pandemic that's going on. Jay can't make it, but I want to talk about some other things. We have, if you go to our website today, you'll see I had a talk, we have various talks up between Jeff Rentz, who has me on Hour 2 on Thursdays, every Thursday. That's sometimes 4 or 5 Thursdays a month, Hour 2 in the program, which is 8 o'clock Pacific time, live. You'll see also a talk that I posted up there between Jeff and Yoichi Shimatsu, who's an engineer, journalist who actually has traveled back and forth to Fukushima Daiichi in Korea and other places. He had a residence up in northern Japan, in the North Island, which he's abandoned, basically. And you'll see a talk that I posted there last week as well between Jeff about the deadliness of what's going on in Tokyo. Today we're going to have Dana Durnford, who is a Canadian expert professional diver for 30 years. He's been on both East Coast and West Coast. So when you hear him, he has a Newfoundland accent. This man is very intelligent and really understands the intertidal area and the ocean. He's been diving off Vancouver Island in the area in the West Coast, U.S. and Canada, for 14 years plus. And he took a team up and did, within the last month, took a team up to the area in the Georgia Strait for 200 kilometers and found the dead zone of the 4 major species gone completely from 200 kilometers along the intertidal region. It's the nursery of the oceans, which means that that's where all the life forms come to life in the oceans. That's where the oceans mix the tidal waves and create more oxygen and water. It's where the life forms have the highest amount of food and the most color. If you're actually diving, you see the color in this intertidal region. And the death of the oceans in the intertidal region in Georgia Strait, which means it had to loop around Vancouver Island, which is 476 kilometers long, and go to the Georgia Strait, where it's the home of the great orca orcinus, the orca whales. There's also, they travel between the Puget Sound, which is Orca Island, all the way up to the islands there, they're between Vancouver and the Georgia Strait, all the way to Alaska. They also travel the oceans along the Pacific Ocean, and these whales are dying. This is deadly. This is unbelievable. Their food sources are gone. They found like one crow, no sea life whatsoever, very small little outcrops of a few areas of some of the kelp, and quite disturbing. So you can actually look at that video. There's an hour, 14-minute video also I posted the last few days, and we'll be talking to Dana Durnford in Hour 3 today. We have also got some apps up there. Edmontonians have phone apps for dealing with Ebola virus, Ebola outbreak, and I posted up an article I think people should read about various aspects. First is from one of my favorite sources for natural news blogs is Green Med Info, and if you should get a membership, it's a great source of information. The battle over genetically modified food organisms, and you'll see all the documentation on it. It's quite disturbing what's going on. It's criminal activity, and we need to expose it. GMO foods are going to be shoved out of India, and I think you're going to see a number of states already blocking it. Oregon is one of the first, and what will happen here was defeated because of some abnormal manipulation here in California last year with the moves of the big biotech companies to lie in the media. But that's going to end. And so we have foxes in the FDA hen house, because the FDA is, we call fatal drugs allowed. They're a criminal organization, and there's a rotating musical chairs between the FDA and these federal agencies and the big biotech companies. Biotech's idolized BT technology may transform benign insects into pests, and we now are seeing that it's killing off some of the normal benign pests and causing other ones to grow much more virulent and vigorous. It's because the Bacillus thuringiensis toxin genes have been transferred into the plant, which kills off the weaker, healthful and useful insects, and is allowing the more pathogenic and nastier bugs to get worse. And India is ready to kick Monsanto out, and it's probably going to do it within a matter of months. So once India does this, it's going to be a death knell for the big biotech push, which, by the way, was totally supported by George Bush Sr., who basically promised Monsanto, I call Mount Satan, and the biotech companies, which are primarily in Argentina, the United States, Canada, and Brazil. These 4 major countries have pushed biotech like crazy, and it's dangerous to the biosphere, it's dangerous to the food supply, and there's lots of reasons why it's dangerous to your health. So if you eat plants and animals that are biotech fuel, that's food that basically is not accepted as normal and has unstable gene plasmids with promoter genes and other genes that act like a neuroplasmal wrapped around chromosomes are unstable and not integrated to the chromosome control system, it's going to wreck your DNA. And just like some of these stupid vaccines, like the adenovirus vaccine developed, that carries a couple of genes from Ebola, and it's really telling that these biotech companies got advance notice from inside sources to go and develop this because the CDC owns patents on the Ebola virus. Genetically modified baker's yeast spreading obesity and diabetes. We're seeing now changes in gut organisms caused by the genetically modified yeast. Scientific name of baker's yeast is Saccharomyces cerevisiae, used in numerous commercial applications. We know that cross reactions between Saccharomyces cerevisiae and specific antigenic proteins, 10 amino acids long, are identical to specific proteins of the basement membrane of the bowel wall. So we know that these things cause irritable bowel syndrome and colitis, especially ulcerative colitis. We know it also causes leaky gut syndrome and many other antigens that can actually trigger off autoimmune diseases and cancer. So not a minor thing, and these drug companies are literally getting away with murder. It's a slow murder, but it's still murder, and we need to stop it. And we have a report here, 28 signs that the West Coast is being absolutely fried with nuclear radiation. That article written by Michael T. Snyder. It comes from GreenMed Info. We have some remarkable reports here in terms of what's going on. In terms of the first thing is polar bears, seals, and walruses along the Alaska coastline suffering from fur loss and open sores. There's epidemic sea lion deaths along the California coastline. Along the California coast of Canada and Alaska coastline, population of sockeye salmon is at a historic low. Something is causing fish along the west coast of Canada to bleed from their gills, bellies, and eyeballs. Vast field of radioactive debris from Fukushima, is approximately the size of California, has crossed the Pacific and starting to collide with the west coast. By the way, this article was posted last October 23rd, 2013, so we're soon going to be up to a year after the article was posted. And something is causing, and we're also seeing a vast field of radioactive debris. Let's see, it's being projected that the radioactivity of the coastal waters off the U.S. coast can double over the next 5 to 6 years. Well, the radiation is moving down, and we're seeing death of the sea stars and many other organisms. This intertidal region, if you look at the video by Dana Durnford, and they called it's called radioactiveproctologist.com. These guys have got a sense of humor, which is typical East Coast. But they're telling the truth, and a photo is worth 1,000 words and more. And they have thousands of photos. So when you look at this, you have to sit down, you got to pray, you got to really kind of bite your tongue. It's not good. When you see the oceans dying, you'll feel a deep sorrow. And you better start praying, because things are going to get a lot worse before they become catastrophic. And we have Farid talking about Kardovite. Farid, are you there?
I am.
Let's talk about why would you take Kardovite? Why would your customers take Kardovite? Let's get down to basics for those people who don't want to be technical, and then we'll become technical in a minute. Why should they take Kardovite? Why don't they take Extendivite?
Well, I'm diabetic, so the reason I take Kardovite is to reduce cardiac risk, and also to improve circulation.
Well, you know that Bruce Willis, if he was, and this is theoretical, it's not real, but if Bruce Willis was to open up a vitamin company, he would call it "Don't Die Hard." And if he had a top product in his list, it would be called Kardovite, because you don't want to die hard. When you stimulate nitric oxide, when you improve microcirculation, when you detox for your liver and all your tissues, chemicals and heavy metals, when you supply oxygen and nutrients to the tissues of the body and the stem cells, you do what Kardovite does. And there's lots of pretenders to the throne. Heart and Body, Strauss Heart Drops, Extendivite, all these other ones, they don't have the validation of the specific molecules, the high-pressure chromatography for every batch. They don't have the original and the proven formula, which I take every day. And you can validate it by measuring with the Berkeley test strips in the back of your tongue your level of nitric oxide. You can validate it with a NEVA arterial and venous study if you've been shown that you actually have venous or arterial partial blockage. that with time it's actually going to open up your circulation. You can see it with a change in heart wall motion studies of an echocardiogram of your heart or transesophageal echo. So when people say they disagree with me, I say, well, start Kardovite. You had a heart attack, you had a deep vein thrombosis, they threatened to do a Dacron graft of your artery in your leg, and 1 in 20 males, by the way, over age 40, has a blocked artery of significant enough level that based on American College of Vascular Surgeons, is criteria for surgical intervention in a Dacron or arterial graft. That's not good. That shows that we're eating crap, bad food, we're exercising poorly, and we're eating in pro-inflammatory molecules and not detoxing from heavy metals and chemicals that fry the inside of our arteries. Because we eat food that has oxidized cholesterol and beef and trans fatty acids, and eating all kinds of garbage that's bad for us, like canola oil, soy oil, peanut oil, etc. that are pro-inflammatory, and then we wonder why we get sick. It's just stupid. So when you start Kardovite, you get the real stuff. You don't get a substitute or kind of a poor secondary. And as I say, if Bruce Willis had a vitamin company, it would be called Don't Die Hard. Ha, you know, the play on the movie, right? So that's why I would tell people to do it. I take it every day, and of course I always exceed in everything. So I take 3 capsules twice a day, which is a whacking dosage. I also take Supernox. I take enzymes nattokinase and lumbrikinase. I take Omega Supreme Krill, Omega Supreme, Omega Cod Liver Liquid, Nutrifos, and Neurogen. And my lipids are absolutely stellar. At 62.5, my lipids are better than a lot of people that I check in their 20s or teens. I mean, they see lipid streaks in 10-month-old babies now because their diet in North America is so awful. Even the mothers that are breastfeeding, their children are getting, if they die traumatically, they're getting signs of atherogenesis. That's not good. It's no wonder we're getting sick and dying early. I see a contraction in human lifespan, IQ, and genetic expression or phenotype. And Kardovite's one of the ways back. You know, if you don't detox, like Sherry Rogers says, you die. And, you know, if you don't want the toxic doctors to give you a pile of drugs to, I call pre-embalming, you know, they give you a special bonus certificate that if you take all their drugs, you get 10% off of your formaldehyde fees at the moment of death. Pretty funny, hey? You get a formaldehyde certificate, say, this person qualifies for 10% off on embalming.
Right. Nice.
So you're a diabetic. Now, how many people out there are hypertensive? How many people want to feel their feet when they get older? How many people want to see? How many people want their liver to come back? How many people don't want to go into congestive heart failure, go into lung failure, or get cancer because they're not detoxing the garbage that's in their body, the heavy metals and chemicals? And Kardovite does all that. And then, of course, you can add other things to it to get a secondary or tertiary kind of level of addition. But core is, and I tell people simple things like, you know, taking Vitamin Mineral Max and Kardovite and Omega Supreme. These are what I call core. If you want to live well in the toxic 21st century, it's not really optional to take nutraceuticals. In this century, if you don't, you're going to show up if we do pack red cell tests or QRMA or, you know, a heavy metal and chemical challenge or a fat biopsy. You're going to be chock-a-block full of toxins. Your arteries are going to be in spasm. You're going to be hypertensive, pre-diabetic, lipid disorders, awful. You're going to be forming atheromatous plaque and have a high-speed CT showing calcified arteries all over the place. And people say, well, I wonder how I got sick, Doc. You took decades of bad behavior, bad food, negligence by your dumb doctors, the dino doctors I call them. You know, the toxic doctors that have no concern whatsoever about the fact you're going downhill to the open maw of a healthcare volcano and you're going to be consumed to ash. But they'll give you medication on the way down to the open mouth of the volcano. They'll make sure your trip toward the nursing facility and memory care is a memorable one. Well, by the way, you won't remember it, but they will. You see, they'll have photos and video of you as you go to memory care, which is part of Obamacare down here. So, so I tell people, you know, take control of your health. Don't listen to the model, whether it's big health care in Canada or Australia, New Zealand, or big insurance care in America. You're the doctor. When you walk into the bathroom in the morning and you kind of make that half grin because you're not quite awake yet, and you try to start brushing your teeth because your mouth is dry, you're looking at your healthcare physician. You need to get educated on the operator's manual of your body. And one of the first things you need to put in your mouth in the morning is either the drops or the capsules of Kardovite. So you can perfuse that brain, that noggin. You can perfuse that heart, your naughty bits, as they say, if you want to continue to be physically and sexually active when you get older. and you want to pull the toxins out so you don't get breast cancer, prostate cancer, bowel cancer. It's all just logic. It's so simple in some ways and so complex in others, but it's easy to do. Just take your Kardovite. So what other advice would you tell people about Kardovite? Because we've talked ad nauseum about all the components of it. But it does all these things: stimulates microcirculation, relaxes your arteries, pulls the toxins out, improves perfusion. It stabilizes and balances your autonomic nervous system. It does all these things. But it's so important, and people don't understand. If you don't help the body naturally, the springs are going to fly off like a movement watch. Things are going to start really happening. They're bad. And, of course, it's a cascade. One thing goes bad, the other thing goes bad. Before you know it, you got hypertension, you got lipid disorders, you got heart failure, you got cancer, you're turning diabetic, you're blowing up like a balloon. All this stuff happens to you because you've been negligent and you haven't taken your Kardovite.
And I should mention, myself being diabetic, I've been diabetic for 15 years. And,
right.
My lipid numbers are 100%. And
you're stellar.
My blood pressure numbers are 100%. In fact, I'm actually a glider pilot. And every year I have to go for an exam.
Right.
And,
you boggle the doctors, right?
Exam.
One of the things I always get a kick out of doctors is when I talk to patients, and this is all over the world, it doesn't matter if it's here or Shanghai, China, and the doctors, they almost cringe when a patient comes in like you. You're diabetic, you should be sicker. What the hell's wrong with you? Why are you showing horrible lipids, bad circulation in your eyes you're going blind, and all the other nasties? You can't get an erection.
I don't have any of that stuff. And I'm healthy enough that they let me take pastures up. So
you're a disgusting bad example. I mean, why don't you have disease? You can't. You're in a space-time anomaly.
I plan to live
to the drug companies.
With this, so
right. So the thing is, you can't get a glider license unless you're in pristine health, because they don't want gliders.
And I also have a power license too. So trust me, they make me jump through a lot of hoops every year. Right.
Now, what I tell people is, if you leave it up to the toxic docs, if you weren't a Kardovite, would be on half a dozen drugs. You'd be probably obese. You'd probably have visual problems and peripheral vascular and neuropathy problems. You would have all kinds of health issues. You'd be well on your way, because many of these drugs, they're used for diabetes-induced renal failure and cancer. You would be a mess, but you'd be a profitable mess. You'd be what's called a profit point for the healthcare system.
Yep.
You're ruining the balance sheet. I don't know. We're constantly curmudgeons. I think that's what our job are. Our jobs, Fareed, is to be what I call curmudgeons to the drug industry. We are just pains in the rumpus, as they say in Britain. Our PA genes are active. Pain in the anatomy. Just by telling people, you can take care of yourself. You don't need to say that you had a diagnosis and you're going to go blind or not get erections or not be able to fly an aircraft. It's amazing. Kardovite. Don't get secondary copycats. Get the real stuff. Get it from us today. Stay well. As I say, may the force be with you, and Kardovite. Back in a moment with Hour 3. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be crazy.